friends. Welcome back to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today we have our friend Jem Fuller all the way from Australia. I love talking to people all around the world. He is a leadership coach, published author, TEDx speaker, and international retreat facilitator. We're going to tell you more about him in 2 seconds, but please stop what you're doing. Like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. Get a t-shirt, coffee mug, tote bag, send me direct donations. Buy a book. Currently working on the audiobook and physical copy for book 13 of my Augury Bibliomancy and Chaos series. 12 books available currently. Great reproductions going back as far as the as 1528, I think was one of the earliest documents I recreated. That's enough housekeeping. Not going to keep our guests waiting. So I know very little about our friend Jem, and what is it you do, and what would you like people to know about you?
Well, g'day, first of all, Benjamin.
Yes, hello.
Thanks so much for having me on the show, man.
Yeah,
it's great. I came across your podcast and I was intrigued. I'm like, yeah, this wizard dude's cool. I want to have a chat with him and see where it goes. So a little bit about me. I live in a small town. About an hour and a half away from Melbourne, one of the biggest cities in Australia, on the surf coast here with my partner and our 4 teenagers. I have had a very colourful life, man. I've packed a lot in around the world, from tribal tattooist to fire dancer to kindergarten teacher in Taiwan, volunteer in third world's builder's labourer, motorcycle courier, corporate leader with a suit and a tie, heaven forbid, because that's not my natural state, barefoot backpacker, and I've lived in India and Asia for many, many years, on the hippie quest for enlightenment, which is all a bunch of fun. But now currently I'm 50 years old. I work as a leadership coach. I'm very lucky to have executive and senior leaders in government, in the private sector, and in the not-for-profit sector. We run retreats normally pre-pandemic and post, when we're allowed to travel again, when they let us out of this big island down here in Australia. We'll be running our retreats in the Himalaya, in northern India, and in Bali again. Cool. Yeah, it is, man. It's super cool. There's a little village over there, which is my second home, and a family, which is my second family. I've known them for 25 years, and we bring some economy into the village. We've built a little school there. We've put in a rubbish education collection program. We sponsor some of the kids through school, and it's beautiful, man. It's a really lovely cross-cultural connection that I have with this family over there. And we take people there every year and trek super remote up in the mountains, and we get people off the grid, and their phones don't work where we go, which is, heaven forbid they can't have access. It's a bit of a shock sometimes, right? Yeah, it is. Well, that's all part of the plan. Oh, yeah. So yeah, man, I feel very grateful. I've got a great life. There's food in the fridge, and the kids are okay, and we're good. We're lucky, and I was able to take all of my work online through the lockdowns over the last couple of years, and I know a lot of people who couldn't. A lot of people who've suffered a lot through restrictions. So I feel very grateful that everything's okay for us. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it seems like we're on a similar metaphysical, spiritual meaning wavelength, I think, between kind of what you're doing and what I'm doing. Definitely you seem to be, and I would say a wizard of a similar, I wouldn't say similar stripe, but you're definitely doing your own form of wizardry. But you seem to be the type that goes out into the world and touches things to release the magic. And I'm more of a sitting in my cave thinking things type of, and there's different, it takes all kinds, there's nothing wrong with it. I have this strange thing with myself where I have a, what is it? This is going to happen a lot. I'm going to think, fantasy wanderlust. The idea of traveling appeals to me in a way that actual travel does not. I get there and I'm like, this is extremely uncomfortable. Nothing's familiar, way out of my element. I don't actually enjoy it. I've tried to, I have this feeling of I want to enjoy it. And it's just not something that I do, but I'm glad that people do, and that you're able to take people with you to have these experiences.
Well, when we connect and communicate like we're doing right now, then you can piggyback and live that vicariously through people like me, man. Because when I'm out there, I'm taking you with me, and you're getting it. You get it. You feel the tingle of it, right? Without even having to leave your cave. So it takes two.
Yeah, this experience of people capturing their experience to share with others has been an amazing change for a homebody. Someone who's like, I'll never see this village in the mountains, but I can watch your video and you can show me what it's like. And I go, that's really cool. I can enjoy it, as you said, at least vicariously, even if I'm like, I don't really want to leave my cave.
Man, when we finish this conversation, jump onto my website, and on there if you go and look at the retreats page, there's a beautifully shot little 2-minute clip. Some filmmaker mates of mine came over and they shot, and you'll see my family, you'll see the village, you'll get a feel for it. It's really beautiful.
That is really cool. Oh, and I completely forgot to mention, because I'm terrible and I forget everything, terrible at this. You can find our friend Jem Fuller at jemfuller.com. That's JEMFULLER. And then also like at Jem Fuller across a bunch of different social media. I'll put those links in the description below. And I was saying off the air, maybe a link to the TEDx speaking, and maybe a link to your other video on this village that I actually want to see. So I'm going to go and find it, and I'll put it in the links.
Awesome, Benjamin. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think that's probably a good introduction. People know where you're coming from, what your background is, and kind of a little bit about who you are. As per my usual process, we're going to jump into the dream section. I'm just going to shut up and listen, and we're going to see what we can make of this. So, yeah, I'm ready when you are.
Okay, cool. So the dream I want to share with you was a pivotal part of a massive change in my life. Some people call this change in their lives their midlife crisis. For me, it was my midlife awakening. It was a midlife opportunity. And so the dream happened in the November, it was at the start of November 2012. And then, just to put it into context of the timing of everything, from this dream, everything kind of, one way of looking at it would be that everything fell apart, everything collapsed. But actually, to me, that was the destruction of the status quo, so that I could have the space for my new life to emerge into. So I lost my job, I lost my marriage, I lost my house. I kept my kids 50-50, which was the most important thing to me. So week on, week off with my kids. But when I left my past life, I left with my two boys, one surfboard, one guitar, and $100,000 of debt. That's all I had. And I mean, no plates, pots, pans, crockery, cutlery, bedding, nothing. So when we found somewhere to live, we literally had to start all over again. And the dream that I'm going to share with you now was pivotal in all of this. So I had been sitting, I still sit in a men's circle. We sit around a fire once a month and we talk men's business, which is really just talking about meaningful themes. And some of the men in this circle have been brought into the tradition of North American Indian sweat lodges. Maybe your listeners do know what that is. A lot of people in Australia don't know what a sweat lodge is. Very simply, it's an old tradition of creating a little shelter that keeps the heat in, and we bring in hot rocks from the fire, from the grandfather fire, and it's pitch black in this shelter. This was a men's sweat, so there was only men in there. You're naked, sitting in the dirt, very, very hot, pitch black. And in this particular sweat, and you sit in there for quite some time, and we're chanting and we're saying prayers, and it's quite spiritual. Anyway, I had an out of body experience, and this, obviously had something to do with the heat, the heat exhaustion, but also to do with the spiritual experience. And I left my body, and it was as I was my 5-year-old self. And the fact that I was 5 was important, because when I was at the age of 6 was a loss of innocence. My father, bless him, God rest his soul, he's not around anymore, and I love him dearly. However, when I was 6, he lost his temper, and he beat me up, and he threw me around my bedroom. And it was at this point in time when I was 6 that I kind of started to first believe that I wasn't good enough, and I kind of lost my innocence. So in the out-of-body experience in the sweat, I went back prior to this time. I went back to the age of 5, where I was completely innocent and happy. And so I was flying around in the universe as this joyful 5-year-old. It was really quite a beautiful experience. And I didn't know, because I was out of body, but the other men left the sweat. And it was just my guide sitting there with me. And my man body, myself in present time, was lying on the dirt, in the dirt, naked, beautifully in semi-consciousness, while I was flying around as a five-year-old. Anyway, I came back into my body, and he helped me come out, and we sat around the fire, and I just had a big smile on my face. It felt like liberation. So that was in real life, the sweat. Then I went home. I went home. My then wife was away, so it was just me and my two boys. And they were at this stage, how long ago is this? 10 years ago. So they were 8 and 5 years old, or maybe 7 and 5 years old or something. And then I went to bed and I went to sleep. And then I had this dream. The dream was one of those ones that's super clear. It's as clear as real life. When you're in the dream, you're completely lucid in the dream. And in this dream, I had this serpent that was living in my core. So right down the core of me, just in front of my spine, was this serpent, and that was its home. But in the dream, I felt like I had to get this serpent out of me. So I was reaching my hands down my mouth and down my throat, and I was grabbing onto this serpent by its tail, and I was pulling it out of my mouth slowly, this wriggling, strong serpent, pulling it out of my mouth. But every time I would pull it out and put it down on the ground, it would very quickly slither back down into its home. It felt like that was its home in my core. And I kept trying to get it out. But every time I would pull it out, again, I would put it down, and it was very fast and slippery and quick and strong, and it would quickly slither back down inside me. And at one point, I put it down on the ground, and I kept my mouth closed so it couldn't go back inside me, and it slithered up my leg and up my anus and back up into my core. So any way that it could get back in there, it was determined to stay in there. And then there were men around me. They felt like brothers. They felt like brothers of the community, like the men I'd been sitting in the sweat lodge with. And so they were there to help me. And I was reaching down inside and pulling this writhing snake out, and they were all helping me and holding onto it, and it was really strong. And then finally, we figured out a method to keep it out of me. And it was a big glass jar, and it had a big lid on it. And the lid on the jar had those hand holds down into gloves, like when you put your hands into a humidity crib with a little baby that's inside a humidity crib, and to keep the baby sterile, you put your hands in through those gloves. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you can help the baby, but it's all sterile. So this lid on this jar had these gloves, and the men undid the lid off the jar for me, and I put my hands into the gloves, and then I could take the serpent, and I was taking it carefully. I didn't want to hurt it, but I had to be quite firm with it. And then I put the serpent in the jar, and while I was holding the serpent, the men closed the lid of the jar for me, and then I could take my hands out, and then the serpent was out of me. The interesting part is that before we got to this part in the dream, in real time and space, one of my children was unsettled in their bed, and I needed to go and settle them. So I was in the middle of this work. It felt like work. It felt like a job I had to do. And I was in the middle of this work in the dream, and I hadn't finished it yet. And one of my children woke. And so I got out of bed and I went into their room and I settled them back to sleep. I came back into my bed and I knew the work wasn't finished. I lay back down and consciously went back into my subconscious to go back and finish the work in the dream. So then I finished the work in the dream, and I woke up in the morning, and that was the dream.
All right. That just feels meaningful. Like right off the bat, they all are, but some of them are like, wow, very densely packed with something important and in a very specific form. And kind of feel like I understand why this would impact you, move you, leave you feeling like something needed to happen. Very
Yeah,
much
yeah,
so.
absolutely. Yeah.
So that is the basics of the dream. And this having happened 10 years ago, you've had time to think about it.
Yeah.
And just for the sake of the audience off camera, we talked about whether or not he was going to tell me, here's what I think it means. And I thought, well, of course, it'd be more fun for everyone if they watch me struggle, because everyone gets a kick out of that. But the possibility that I'm going to come to maybe a different conclusion, or might arrive at the same conclusion through my process, which might be interesting.
Yeah.
So what I do, we get the just the dream as told by the dreamer. Then we go back for the deep dive, and I start trying to see it, put myself in it in the way, experience it as the dreamer did as much as possible. So what I would want to start with is, what was your sense of your surroundings at the very beginning of the dream? Obviously, you are there. This snake you describe in you is there. There's a sense of that experience. Any particular environment? I mean, a completely blank slate, a sweat lodge, anywhere you remember
We were outside. We were outside in nature. Yeah.
When you
so
say
somewhere outside in nature, yeah.
Any sense of the landscape? We got bushes and shrubs and dirt and rocks and trees and sky. Any impressions of those type of environmental objects?
I want to say we were in a clearing surrounded by, you guys would say forest. In Australia, we call it the bush, which is the native vegetation. But we were in a clearing.
And there were no signs of, say, human construction?
No.
You were not visibly on the outskirts of a city?
No.
That kind of thing. Daytime? Nighttime? Or no sense?
Yeah, I want to, no real sense. It was light enough to see. It felt like daytime. Or, it felt like maybe dusk or dawn. It wasn't bright blue skies, but it wasn't nighttime.
And that's interesting too. So there's what did I put little carrots on things, and the idea that you're in say a forest clearing, you're in nature. Dusk and dawn, iconically, dusk and dawn are transitional times. The sun's rising, the sun's setting. That's ancient, and human understanding goes way back. We know we're about to move from one state of being, this active in the day, which is the time for specific things, to now it is night, and we do different things when we can't see. That's in our DNA. So that's very interesting too. You're right off the bat. You're in a natural setting, absent human influence, construction. That's why I pulled that word out, construction, on purpose. Is no one has built this place for you. It's something that just naturally, literally exists. There's no signs that people have modified it to change it into something else. And you're on in the middle of a transitional experience, dusk to dawn, etc. Very interesting. So this is where my brain starts going, okay, we got a story here. Something's happening. We're setting the scene in our mind. And a lot of times this starts this lays the foundation for what is then to come. It's like, okay, imagine yourself in a specific kind of idea, place, concept. We're going to build on that and go to the next thing that links to that thought or takes place in that setting, bounded by what that setting means to you. I try not to get into, well, what does it mean? We get there along the way and also at the end, but I start making that's important, little notes. So were you at that time already aware that there were other people around you, or did you not become aware they were there until later?
Yeah, I didn't become aware until later. Initially, it was just me trying to, extract this serpent and keep it out. And then I needed some help.
Yeah, that's an important thing too. So, I don't know why, but that sends up a smoke signal for me or whatever. The idea that, okay, your brain says, first imagine you're trying to handle a problem by yourself. And it didn't put you in a situation where other people were present to help or present to observe. So this is a very, maybe think of this as a private thing, something you are struggling with alone. In that sense, you're in the clearing by yourself. Yeah. So did you have a sense of yourself bodily being clothed, naked?
Naked.
Okay. So right off
It
the,
wasn't. That wasn't an issue. It wasn't like, oh, I'm naked. I'm only thinking on reflection when you ask me that. As I've recalled this dream over the last 10 years, that was not something that I was necessarily conscious of. But as you asked me then, that was the first thing that came to me. The reason I say that is because at one point the serpent slithered up my leg and up my anus and back up into my center. So I must have been not clothed.
and that makes a tremendous amount of sense too. So it's there's and because it didn't stand out as something you would mention to say I was naked and that was a problem for me. I felt uncomfortable with it. I felt vulnerable with it. But it's your brain's kind of even stripping away the trappings of clothes as an exterior. There's something. So it can be a vulnerability in the oh, I'm naked and people are seeing me sense, or a vulnerability as in everything is exposed and can be seen type of sense. And that also can reflect back on seeing yourself in a naked sense without modification, the most true perception of yourself. There's something in there.
Yeah, the latter one you described just then, that's what it feels like.
Yeah, for sure. So this is why when people say, I read a dream book and it said, if you're naked, it means, no, I don't think it does. Maybe not for you. Maybe it does, but there's not always one size fits all. Yeah, being naked can mean a lot of things. Okay, so we've gotten the forest clearing, and you become aware that there is something inside you, and it's immediately characterized by your mind as this is a serpent, and it is inside me.
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember what it looked like? Like if you had to describe color, length, thickness?
Yeah, it was big. You know, it was quite long and thick, and you know, when I was pulling it out, I had to really open my mouth as wide as it possibly could go to actually extract this serpent out of me, and it was strong. You know, it was writhing and strong. It was never violent. It wasn't like it was trying to kill me. It just wanted to be left alone in its home, which was down like I said, down the core of me, right down the core. You know, almost wrapped around my spine, but just kind of deep down the center of me. And you know, as I pulled it out, it was bigger than it felt when it was inside me. When it was inside me, it was almost like I couldn't even notice it. But as I pulled it, as I was trying to extract it, it was big and strong and thick.
Okay. So much.
Kind of like a python, it felt like a python, like a carpet python.
Now, is that okay, we've seen the movie, and that's like a 30-foot long, probably 4-foot circumference snake or whatever. Not that big, but like the real,
not that big.
More of a real kind of python that might be 10 or 13 feet long and maybe, yay big around
like
or something.
Like that.
Like
a
fatty.
That.
Yeah. Lots of interesting images here too. So that there's a lot in the experience of it. This is something inside of you, this thing which feels at home where it is. It wants to be there. It's not a threat. It's not, you don't believe it's trying to kill you or necessarily intends harm. And there's two separate things there. Sure, you didn't mean it, but I'm still hurt. And maliciously, you're trying to kill me. So there's two different things, but this is definitely something you didn't want in you. You've decided it needs to go.
Correct.
But it doesn't want to leave on its own, and to the point where it keeps coming back.
Correct.
That's a very powerful metaphor for all kinds of things in life where we're trying to change who we are. I mean, in that sense of there is something inside of me I have decided does not belong there, and I am going to take it out. Man, it doesn't want to leave, and it is making it really hard on me. It keeps coming back like involuntarily.
That's right.
A lot of bad habits is in that direction.
Yeah.
That's
and I before knowing it was there, I didn't know it was there.
Yeah.
You know. So at the start of the dream, it's like, what is this? Reaching down and in. and then feeling its
Okay.
tail and going, oh wow, there's something in here. What is this? And then pulling it out and going, oh wow, it's a snake. It's a serpent, and I don't want it in me. So before knowing it was there, I didn't know it was there.
That's very. I mean, I completely forgot to ask that question. Like the process of becoming aware of it. I almost thought that the dream began with you knowing it was there, but there was maybe a brief moment of establish your surroundings. Now you
Yep.
become aware that there's a problem. There's a
Yeah.
self-discovery process in there. You're like, I feel something isn't right.
That's
I'm
it.
going to investigate.
Yeah.
What is this? Was there a moment of alarm? Was there a panic sense of get this out of me, or was it
Um,
curiosity?
yeah, I don't remember it being, it wasn't anything like nightmarish. There was a sense of urgency to it, and it was a bit freaky. It was a bit like, oh, what? I didn't know this was here. And then there was an urgency to wanting to get it out and keep it out, and a little bit of um, it was a little bit unsettling that I would get it out and think I had done the job, and then it would quickly slither back in. And it took several tries to get it out, and then I couldn't keep it out on my own. I needed help. So it was a bit, um, I knew that I really wanted it out of me, and I really wanted to keep it out of me, but I couldn't do it. So that was a bit like, oh, geez.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it wasn't a nightmare. It was very clear. I didn't feel in danger per se, but I did feel a sense of urgency.
Yeah, I think these are all very important things to conceptualize in looking at this problem. So you found something in you that you were surprised to find. The experience of it coming back was, as you say, unsettling, because you're trying to settle maybe into a new state of being absent this thing, and it keeps coming back. So you can't literally unsettling. You cannot settle into a new
Yeah.
behavioral pattern,
Yeah.
and not panic, not fear, not this screaming terror, get this out of me, but a sense of urgency, like now that I have found whatever this is,
Yeah.
I must act upon this discovery without delay. And that's
Yes.
definitely and that the immediate feeling was, now that I've found it, well, this is obviously something that doesn't belong. This has got to go. There was never a doubt. That was your first just gut instinct and
100%.
stayed throughout the dream.
100%. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. So let me look at my notes here. I read my own chicken scratch. From your previous language, you said it's, lying in my core, and almost settled against the spine in a way. I don't know if there's a better way to describe that, or if that wording is sufficient to kind of lead us in a direction of kind of examining why it would be in that particular place. You didn't pull it out of your belly. You didn't pull it out of your ear. It's definitely something you had to discover by reaching into your mouth. And that's mouths we eat, we speak, we kiss. There's all kinds of things we do that are orally centered in a way. I mean, for one person, it might relate to smoking. For another person, it might, they're trying to go vegan, so it's very much a personal thing. But then the idea that that you have this knowing that it is resting along your spine. So not on the behind your spine, but like between your spine and your guts in that type of a space. What do you, when you think of that, this is where when you think of just that concept, what comes to mind? Anything about that location in the body?
It felt like it was wrapped around my energy line that joins up the chakras. So I imagine that my energy centers, we can call them chakras or energy centers or call them whatever we want to call them, but these energy centers that are in the very middle of us. And I feel like there's a line of energy drawn from the crown right down through to my base chakra. And it felt like from my throat down to my base chakra, the serpent was entwined and wrapped around my energy line.
Yeah. What is that yogic or Eastern chakra conception of that connection? How would you describe that if you're trying to tell someone what that energy line is, what it does?
Well, it's like, if you imagine that we have the arteries and the veins and the capillaries that are the flow of blood through our whole body, then this energy line is the flow of energy through our body. And the meridians, and the chi, the life force energy. And it's the center of that. It's like the central nervous system for the energy flow.
Maybe am I mistaken in recalling, or did I make this up in my mind, that different chakras regulate different emotions, behaviors?
Different energies, yeah.
Yeah. So if you were to characterize this as one form of energy versus a different one, like you said, there's the crown chakra, and that regulates what, or expresses what?
I think, and again, I'm a bit of a layman in this, so this is just my interpretation of it. Mm-hmm. But I think that probably my interpretation is what matters in this dream thing, because it's my dream, right?
I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah.
Even if you're completely wrong, that still may be the correct interpretation.
Yeah, right. So my interpretation of the chakras is that the crown chakra is our access to the universe, to the divine, to the enlightened, to the knowledge of everything, of the universe. And then the throat chakra is expression, our ability to express ourselves, to feel heard, to speak. Heart chakra is our access to love and compassion. And then moving down to our gut chakra, which is, there's an intelligence there as well. And it's the seat of our own personal kind of, happy Buddha. And then down to the base chakra, we're accessing our kind of more primal energies, our sexual drives, and our, that more carnal drive or motivation. And for me, the serpent was wrapped around every part of me from the throat down. But it didn't feel like it was wrapped around it didn't have anything to do with my crown chakra. It was wrapped around everything else.
It does seem like it started at the throat chakra. So it actually left that unaffected, unincorporated into its extension. But so I'm glad you explained it to me, number one, because so I can get an idea of what you think it is, but also to wrap my brain around how it is. Because I knew each one kind of had a different, something, a different human capacity, so to speak, linked to it. And this is, so it's very much, so it's leaving out the divine enlightenment section. It doesn't touch that. It doesn't reach all the way there, but it wraps around or incorporates, impedes, exists along everything else and stretches the full length of it. And that's where it's happy. So whatever it is in your mind is encompassing almost the totality of human experience, except touching the divine, access to the divine. That's interesting too. And you wanted it out. When you wanted it out, did you feel it was, why did you want it out? Did you have a concept of why it was necessary to remove it?
Yeah, it was time. It was time for it to not be, it was time for it to not have its home in me. It was time for us to separate. It felt like it had grown in me. It felt like ever since it was a tiny, since its own conception was in me. It didn't know any other home, but it wasn't me. It felt like it was a part of me. The serpent felt like, kind of like, why are you trying to get me out of you? This is my home. This is where I've grown up. And it felt like it had been in me for a long time, but it was time for it to go. It was time. I don't know how to say it other than that.
Fair enough. So the time felt right to remove it.
Yes.
But you didn't have an explicit sense say that it was impeding anything, blocking anything, serving as an impediment or blockage. Those are the words that come to my mind. Right?
Yeah. It did. It felt like it was. Okay. It felt like it was impeding upon something. It felt like, I really needed to get this out. It was very important to get it out. Like I said, I even came out of this dream and went and settled my kids in the next bedroom, and then came back to bed and went straight back into the dream to finish the work. So
Yeah.
it was very important to get it out.
Gotcha. That's, yeah, and kind of nailing down the reason it needed to be removed, if it were possible to be super specific, would probably give us a huge clue as to what it is and why it needed to go. But that may be something we get down to eventually. I'm trying to ride that line between asking you questions to directly answer and asking you for your interpretation at the end of it, because some of it's looking back. I'm trying not to.
Oh, good, man.
Confuse the two, if at all possible.
Yeah.
But it was time for it to go, and it felt like it had grown with you over time. It had expanded along this chakra path naturally as you grew. It grew with you.
Yeah.
And it felt comfortable there. And it's very interesting that you're not conflicted about removing it. It's resistant to removal. Like, it has its own sense of what it wants, what it desires. It's comfortable where it is. It doesn't want to leave. That's an interesting conception of what that is, what that represents. I'm not sure yet, but it's very interesting. Yeah, that it's not you conflicted about removing it. You've made a decision, but it's
straight away.
And maybe that's just that representation of habits that are hard to break. It feels like there's a resistance to them. There's a part of you that you reject, and that's the part of you that enjoys the habit or the comfort of it, all the different things that draw us to that familiarity. And sometimes we conceptualize those as, that is no longer a part of me. It's still in me, but it's not me anymore. It's got to go. I don't know if I'm, and you don't have to tell me, but this is where I'm going with some of this stuff, and it might make sense in the context of what you feel like you already know about what
it's already. It's already making all the sense. Yeah.
Okay. Good deal.
Yeah.
So you removed it once. So there was the exploratory questing inside the place of expression and finding the thing that needed to. And it's funny because when we say expression, we think of, it's a phrase. I express myself, but there's also we would use it in the maternity sense. Women express milk. It's also to exude something, or to pull out of. You think of a better way to say that?
No, just to take something from inside to outside.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't find the word. So, and it is, you use the portal of expression to remove the thing that you did not want there anymore.
Yeah.
And as you pulled it out, you had to open as wide as possible. There's something in there that this thing is bigger than it seems upon attempted removal.
Yes.
Yeah. And,
exactly, man.
Yeah.
Bigger than it seems upon attempted removal.
Yeah. It's like, whoa, I didn't know this went so deep, or that when you got it outside your body, you were able to say,
wow,
look at how huge this is. How did that even fit? Yeah. That's
exactly.
Way too huge. It's like this.
That's what it was like.
Yeah. This kind of disproportionate thing. So you ended up, as you pulled, say, the last of it out, was it already trying to fight its way back in before you finished?
It was already trying to find its way back in. Yeah. If I'm holding onto this portion of the serpent, I'm putting this portion down on the ground, the other part of it's already wriggling and trying to get back up in. It was like a struggle between the two of us. And as soon as it would slip out of my hands and vroom, straight back in, like quickly, zoom,
Yeah. I don't think you mentioned a distinctive pattern or color on the creature.
No, I didn't see a pattern on it. I don't remember a pattern. I'm wanting to say it was a dark olive green. I'm kind of making that up. I don't really remember.
No, and that's perfectly fine. So I do a lot of what I call rattling doorknobs. Wasn't actually a door. It was something else. It was what is that thing where Wile E. Coyote, then he paints the thing and the Roadrunner runs through it, but then he tries to run through it and smashes his face into it. That's kind of like a fake door. That wasn't even a door. It was a picture of a door. But sometimes those questions reveal things too, in terms of the idea that it was a normal looking snake, so to speak. what are snakes? Olive green. Your brain pulled that out. But what it didn't pull out was it was jet black and slimy. It wasn't purple. Like why a purple or rainbow colored snake? I mean, those might mean different things. So it actually closes off that avenue of okay, that actually wasn't important. The dream didn't have anything to say about, okay, make it a specific color for a reason.
No, that's right.
It was snake colored. Fair enough.
Yeah.
So do you remember each attempt up to a certain point being the same, or did you attempt different strategies for removal? Like you pulled it one way one time, a different way another time. You tried hanging upside down backwards off a tree and to pull it out. Any unique experience between multiple attempts?
Yeah. No, the first 3 or 4 times I tried, I was just trying the same way, and I could get it out, but I was still holding on to it. But as soon as I let go of it, it would go back inside. And 2 or 3 times it just went back inside down through my mouth. Then say perhaps the 3rd or 4th time, that's when it went up, back up in through the anus. And then I realized that to keep it out of me, I'd have to be more clever about it. I had to devise a way to keep it out of me. It wasn't going to just stay out of its own accord. That's when the men were around me in a circle helping. And that's when we came up with the ingenious idea of, wow, here's this glass jar.
Yeah, we haven't gotten there yet. We're like a half an hour into the dream description and discussion, and we're still getting there, which this is why I call it the deep dive. And because I'll ask 5-10 minutes and we'll have a whole conversation about one tiny slice that was a flickering image but it left that strong impression. So that's why I wanted to get into. Sometimes there's something it's trying to work through or represent in images that would be relevant in the methodology of attempted removal. So there, you did have some experiences, and I wanted to get a better view of it. So you did it the first couple of times, and it's the attempted removal was a struggle. It's fighting to get back in immediately. There's the first couple of times you try it the same way. You haven't even let go of it yet, and it's already back in, so you got to start over. Then you get this idea occurs to you, oh, it's getting back in through my mouth, so I'm going to close my mouth. I'm going to stop up, restrict, close the portal of expression to see if that is effective at keeping it out. That's at one part. What am I trying to say? That's almost a no-brainer. Like, oh, it's getting in my mouth. Shut your mouth and see what happens. But I wonder do you have a sense that had more meaning, that there was something more meaningful, that it was always trying to get back in the mouth specifically? Does that stand out?
No, that's just because that's just where it came out of. That's where it was trying to get back in.
Fair enough.
And it didn't feel like it was about that. It felt like that's where I'd pulled it out of. So that's where it just went back in. And then I just tried to find a way to keep it out. So I was like, well, you're not coming back in here. So it went, well, I'm going to go up there then.
Yeah. It's a very logical thing. It was coming out of my mouth, therefore shut my mouth, and maybe that would keep it out. And sometimes it's very literal, physical.
Very literal, that bit felt, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. But the idea that speaking of the fact that it was crafty enough to outsmart your logical.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
It was organically smart enough to outsmart my logical thinking way of trying to, get it out.
Yeah, and I think there's something in there too. So if we're conceptualizing this as a quote unquote bad habit or whatever, or some part of a person that they do not want in, we try many different strategies to, when we start with the most obvious, and if that fails and we learn why it fails, it found another way back in. It changed its own tactic to get back in. Sometimes there's if we use the analogy at the very least of a bad habit, we will find different triggers that drive us towards it. We eliminate one trigger and we realize, oh, this other situation I didn't even think of is the same for reasons I didn't understand. There was another way in that never occurred to me, and bam, I'm back in the same place, experiencing the same thing I don't want to be experiencing. Yeah, that was a very powerful representation, I'd say, of your mind, saying that what would it be telling you? You've tried maybe to deal with this unsuccessfully in very practical ways that proved ineffective. And there was the demonstration of that principle, then the demonstration of the realization that I'm going to need help with this. This is apparently something I can't do on my own, whatever it is I'm trying to show myself. And then that's when other people show up. And for the first, do you have an experience? Okay, wait, before I get on to that, the first attempted removal was the mouth, and the natural thing was to close it. Completely logical connection there. It is interesting that if you're removing it by the expressive chakra, it changed its tactics and came back in through the base primal sexual carnal physical chakra. I don't know if that stands out to you as meaningful. It may or may not. It could be as simple as it found another way in. That's another entry point.
That's what it was.
That's what it feels like.
It felt like it. Yeah.
Okay, good deal. Not everything is metaphorical. Sometimes it is literal. Your brain just says this, uses that iconography for just to demonstrate a principle rather than stack layers of meaning inside of it. So sometimes the interpretive thing is going between my intuition of asking questions and your intuition of that doesn't feel right. And then we get something reasonable. So, but you did have that impression of people, you're going to need help with this. So your brain, say, provides you this experience of now other people are here. Now imagine you've acquired that. Do you recall having called out for them? Do you remember them arriving in any particular fashion? Just appeared.
They just appeared. And it felt like they were always close by, but just not in my awareness.
Okay.
You know, now this is retrospectively in the dream.
Sure.
You know, before I was aware of them, I was alone. And then as I became aware of them, it was like they were always there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sorry, sometimes I get quiet. I'm writing. That is interesting too. There's something in there in terms of until you realize a specific solution is possible, it's not in your awareness. But it's not like that solution wasn't always there.
Just like that.
Yeah, it's kind of like there's these things around us that the only difference is we see it for the first time. We go, well, of course, there it is.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, then we become aware of it. It's very interesting. Do you have a concept of them visually? Number, appearance, etc.
Half a dozen men, not necessarily men that I knew. They weren't specific men in my actual life, but they felt like brothers. And when I say brothers, I mean brothers in terms of the same community, of the same, you know, they felt like good men who were there to help, but I didn't know who they were specifically.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's a very significant part of it as well. I'd say the idea that you knew immediately they were not there to hurt you.
100%.
Yeah, exactly.
That was never a question.
Yeah, good deal. So if we characterize it that way, your brain is saying, okay, now imagine as soon as you realize the need for help, you realize it's always been a lot closer than you thought. You just had to think of it, and you almost magically they appear. Sometimes I waffle back and forth about whether there's a significance to cutscene transitions versus behavioral. So your brain didn't show you the need to go and seek them out. You didn't have to even change your location. It's almost like just shifting your perspective to see what is already
there.
Right
I just became aware of them.
Yeah,
I wasn't aware of them, and then I just became aware of them.
Good deal. Were they similarly naked?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So very
and
much...
again, that wasn't an issue. It wasn't like, oh wow, there's naked men around. It wasn't like that. It was just there were men there to help. And when I look back, because the dream was very clear in terms of visually super clear. So I look back now and they were naked, but in the moment of being in the dream, that was a complete non-issue. That wasn't even something that I was aware of even.
Sure. And my thought initially when you said that was the idea that it's a similarity to you. Whatever you conceived of as the reason for you being naked, that's another reason for them to be identical in that sense.
Yeah.
They are the same.
There was a similarity.
They are very much
something we had in common.
Yeah, yeah.
I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
I became aware that I wasn't alone.
And you use a lot of those words too, the brotherhood, community, good man, there to help. So they appear like you. In that physical sense of the, but also whatever that, as I was saying earlier, whatever being naked means to you in terms of vulnerability or without artifice,
without cloaks, without
idea of a cloak, unhidden,
without hiding behind anything.
Yeah,
this is like fully vulnerable, naked. This is me as I am standing here, completely uncloaked.
Now, at this point, had you already been doing the sweat lodge stuff, or did that came after?
Yeah. We'd been in a sweat that night.
Okay,
and it was my first proper sweat. Yeah.
Gotcha. My brain is horrible holding on to information. I knew you'd mentioned it. I couldn't remember, but it was literally the same day. So that may be also responsible for the naked iconography type of thing. You're having this,
100%.
This spiritual experience, and now you're going to represent it as the same in your dream. So, and I think what you described was that at first they also tried to help you physically remove it. They were trying to hold on to it.
Yeah, it was always up to me to remove it. They never tried to come over and put their hands down my throat. It was always me removing it. They were just there to try and help me find a way to keep it out of me. And interestingly, they didn't come up with the idea for the jar necessarily. That I feel like I owned the ingenuity to come up with this way. They were literally there to help me hold this writhing serpent and then undo the lid on the jar. And then when I put it in, I needed their help to do the lid back up. So I needed their help to support me with what was my idea and my work. It was my work to do. I just needed their support. It wasn't like it was like, oh, they've come to rescue me and they're going to do it all for me. I still had to do it. I just needed their support.
Definitely. And that's a very good description of it too. And that's what I was getting down to with the visual representation. As you were pulling it out, did they then also hold on to the portions that were coming out or not?
Yeah. As I pulled it out and it was writhing, they would come in to help me hold it.
Did it also then get back in while they were physically trying to help you hold it?
No,
or was that when it transitioned to the jar?
Yeah. Once they all had a hold of it, it couldn't get back in because we were all holding on to it and we had it. And it's like, right, what do we do now? And I don't remember speaking to them literally, but I think expressing myself telepathically, and we could communicate telepathically. And I was saying, it's no good to put it down and let go of it. It'll just go back in. We need to do something else. And that's when the jar appeared. And that's when, they held on to the serpent so I could put my hands in the gloves through the lid. It was very technical. And then I could get the serpent with my hands, my gloved hands, and then I could put it in the jar, but I was holding onto it in the jar. So I needed them to do the lid up. So the men did the lid up and then I could let it go. Yeah.
I think that's a very important element too, is that it wasn't a rescue in that sense. It wasn't someone coming to solve your problem. They were there to help. But they were there very much to help under your direction. You had to be the one. They're like, we got it. Now what do we do? We put it down. It's going back in. This fight isn't over. It had to be then contained. I mean, that's literally a jar, a container to fully separate this thing from you in a way that it couldn't get back in. And you were going to need help to do that. But you actually had to come up with it on your own. Like the idea had to come from you. This is what I believe will work. Yes. And then to then have the assistance needed for the implementation. That's where a lot of these things come from. Is very, very different relationship from someone who requests to be fixed and someone who is
that's
trying to
right.
fix
Yeah.
themselves but
Yeah.
needs
It was the opposite of
needs a
that.
hand.
Yeah, that's right. And some of them, I think there were even some men who weren't needed in the actual hands-onness, but they were there to witness. You know, they
Okay.
felt like they were there to just bear witness to the process, to the expression.
Yeah. That is interesting too. There's a lot of, say, if we're trying to change ourselves, there's a part of that we need validated by witnessing. We need someone to say, I see what you've done. I see what you're doing. I see your struggle. I see the results. And sometimes we need people to help, to literally go hands-on and try to help us figure something out or put something together. But then there's also that observer social validation of witnessing what is it? There's that movie, literally Witness Me. The new, you know what I'm talking about. The Mad Max. People, it's like, I'm going to do something heroic. I'm going to, and the what makes it worthwhile is that I have been witnessed doing it.
Yeah.
It would be less meaningful if it was not observed, if someone else couldn't appreciate it for what it is. I don't know if that inspires any thoughts.
Validation, kind of validation that makes the transformation real in some way, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, a lot of times we need that too. That idea of social feedback that we've accomplished something meaningful. And sometimes you can be very certain in your own mind that you're doing the right thing, but there's a different feeling, a different layer, a different meaning to it that someone else saw it and says, that's good. That's good. I get it. I know why you did it. I think you did the right thing. It's one thing to be sure. It's another thing to have someone else say, I agree. Very cool. Very cool. So you thought of, the thought occurred to you and there was no, they didn't bring the jar over. It was just kind of there.
Yeah, it just appeared.
And there were enough. And then you, now when you say jar, are you talking about, say, like a large round clear glass container that had like a circular lid, and that's where you put your hands through? Because I'm conceiving the dangerous chemical laboratory box where you put your arms in and you can pour the chemicals together and they're not going to get on your hands and the gas is not going to escape the box. Yeah,
that's what the glove lid bit was like, and then the big glass jar was just like that. It was just like a big glass jar, that you would put animal specimens in, that you would put a snake in. I don't know.
For sure.
But the glove bit was like that. And the glove bit too, for me, was in my psyche or my subconscious, because my first child was born 10 weeks prem with heart deformities. And so he spent his first 5 weeks of his life in a humidity crib on life support. So the first time I became a father, my access to touching my child was through these gloves.
Yeah, and that's why I initially described it, just to get it clear in my mind that we are talking about that type of laboratory dangerous chemical place. But your specific connection, the one you volunteered and the one you just reinforced, is that this is somehow connected to that experience. It seems like something very uniquely specific to you, to your experience with your kid, to your experience of becoming a father, that you had to, as you said, reach out and have this connection through this medium of a distance that was for the child's safety and security, something necessary for the child, but something that removed you from them in a way you wouldn't prefer. If it wasn't necessary, you wouldn't have done that. But you were damn well going to do it, because you're not going to not touch your child, even if you have to do it through gloves. There's, I don't know if this is where we might be getting down into, I got to ask what that means to you or why, or I'm not sure what to make of it, but that seems impossible that it's not connected to the necessity of pulling this thing out of you, and handling this thing as if it were somehow similar to this child you could only have contact with through that medium. Now you're handling, rather than something you wanted to reach out and connect with, now you're separating yourself from something through the same type of imagery. I don't know if that
Separation,
I don't know if-
individuation.
I
Yeah.
don't know if anything comes to mind on that. The idea of using that same medium to separate yourself from something you wanted gone that you
Yeah,
used
maybe that medium was just available to me subconsciously because I'd used it in my real life. So in the subconscious, neurology of my mind, that was available to me as a means of getting something done.
Sure, it is, and it's a very strong impression. So it would be able to be easily accessible by the mind's eye to say, "Hey, I remember there was a container that was very effective. What if we use the same thing this time?"
Yeah,
It
that's
could be
right. And
could be
it's
as simple
interesting
as that.
because I didn't want to kill the snake.
Yeah,
I didn't want to hurt the snake. I didn't want to hurt the serpent. It kind of felt like tough love, and it was. I don't want to hurt you, serpent, but I need you out of me. I wasn't doing it for the benefit of the serpent. I was doing it for my benefit. It really felt like I need you out of me. I'm sorry, but I need you out of me. Now, I
yeah,
don't want to hurt you, but I am going to manhandle you, so to speak.
yeah,
I'm going to do what I need to do because I have to keep you out of me. And I'm going to put you safely in this jar, but I'm going to lock you in there because I can't have you
You're
in
not getting back
anymore.
in. This is final. Yeah, that's
Right.
happening.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah,
is
yeah.
interesting too that your mind wants to conceive of it that way. There is no desire to hurt, to kill. There's no malice. This is not.
No.
Your brain is saying, do not conceive of this process as something born of negative emotion.
Correct.
It's
Yeah.
100% positive, even to the point where you're going to be gentle with the thing that needs to go. You don't even
Yeah,
have that shred of anger or malice
Yeah.
inside of you towards even the process.
No.
So that's very interesting too.
Yeah.
What was I trying to say? And then the containment of it in that gentle manner, but in a final manner. Like this is,
Yeah.
and the idea that that locking it out was going to take as much help as getting it contained,
Yeah.
or that the process of containing it included locking it, and other people had to do that because all you could do is hold on to it and keep it at a distance, but you needed this support network maybe
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be accountable to to provide that missing element that you couldn't provide on your own. Something
Yes.
in there.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
And then that at what point in this dream experience did you actually wake up before going back to sleep? Did we pass it already in the dream description?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. I woke up. I woke up before the other man appeared.
Okay, so you actually got to a point where you had.
But I didn't just wake up. I got woken up by the cries of one of my children in the real world.
Yes.
So I didn't kind of wake up out of the dream going, oh.
Okay,
No, I was
that's a good
in the
distinction.
dream. I was in the dream, and in my actual house in the room next door, my child was crying, and I was like, oh, I've got to go and deal with that. So I think I might have even kept my eyes closed, and I kind of stumbled down the corridor, and I went in. It's okay, back to sleep. So my child went back to sleep, and then I came back into my bed, and I knew I've got to go back into this dream and finish this work. That's what I knew in my conscious mind already. It felt like work that had to be done.
Yeah. Well, if you wake up and you have that kind of a feeling, this is what I tell people too, is that dreams self-select for importance. If there's something in there you really need to know, something that actually whatever you are, your soul, your spirit, whatever it is, if you have that feeling of resonance, if you have the feeling of importance, then it's something you probably should return to. So it makes sense to me. That is interesting too. So if we look at the idea of, it's possible the interruption of going to care for your child, you carried back with you into the dream this conception of the nursery device that might have actually then suggested an imagery to finish the dream.
Got it. Yeah.
You may not have gone there on your own without having been interrupted. It might have had a different conclusion.
I know what you mean. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
For sure. And then once you got it contained, locked, you were able to pull your
Take
hands
my hands out. Yep.
And then was that the end of the dream? Was there a little bit more?
No. Then that was the end of the dream.
Okay.
Once I knew that we had been successful, and I removed my hands from the lid and from the gloves, and there was a sense of relief, like success. The dream ended.
Okay.
Like, I want to say it ended kind of instantly. It didn't feel like it morphed into another dream or anything. I don't remember it going into a different chapter of the dream. It felt like dream ended. I think I even woke up straight away.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to tell you what I thought when I first sat up in my bed, but I had a thought clear as day. Like,
well,
as clear as day.
we've gotten the end of the deep dive, and actually, if you hadn't already had this 10 years ago and had a long time to think about it, if you had this last night, I would still ask you to describe that thought. So I think we're probably getting into a good time where my questions and my focus can no longer be interrupted by your reflections. So it's probably a good time to say, what did you think immediately upon awakening?
So I woke up and I sat up in my bed, and it just straight away, it became completely clear to me. And I went, oh, wow, that serpent was the belief that I have been growing and nurturing inside myself, the belief that I'm not enough, that I'm not good enough.
Okay.
And it's time for that belief to go.
Yeah. I mean, I think I can see it in everything that you've said. I mean, that makes perfect sense too. Sometimes dreams come out like that and they are immediately understandable. They suggest their own resolution in a way that I don't think I can do it any better necessarily.
I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know what to do with that knowledge, but I sat upright in my bed, Benjamin, and I just straight away went, and I had never thought until this moment, I had never thought that I had a belief that I wasn't good enough. I had tricked myself. I wasn't aware the serpent was there. I didn't know it was there. And then when I started to pull it out, then I started to realize, wow, this is big. This is big. I've got this belief that I've had growing inside me most of my life since I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
That I'm not enough. And then I started to go and research it and do a lot of, and then my midlife crisis, and then had to lose everything to build everything back up again, and that whole story. But and I'm not sure if you're interested in how that I found out later that belief had manifested in me, the belief that I'm not enough. But anyway, that's other stuff.
Well, for sure. No, we definitely can. I'll take whatever folks are interested in talking about. Definitely. What I was thinking was sometimes, so if you wake up with a clear understanding, that's maybe not the right way to put it. That it's a good enough way to put it, but what am I trying to say? When a solution, a meaning suggests itself to you, and it feels perfect. It feels like that. Of course, that's what it means. There's no other possible. Go with that, because what your brain's doing while you're asleep is thinking through the process. It's trying to show you the story of a particular kind of idea, and then a lot of times it's also trying to show you what you think might be effective interventions, solutions, necessarily complications you will face in the process. So if we look back at it, that's why I was saying, and it sounds superficial, of course, oh no, now that you said it, all the imagery lines up, but it's definitely something you had to discover. You were surprised to find it. Yep. Surprised that it would be so. You were already anticipating, before you even started trying to remove it, you anticipated that this process was going to be difficult, and that and I would say you probably acted this out in real life later on, is that you went, maybe that's not the right way to say it, but did you short circuit or shortcut attempting to do this on your own and go straight towards looking for help with it? Because you knew the dream said, no, you didn't.
No, I didn't learn the lessons from the dream that
fair
quickly.
Enough. It can be that, right? Now you get 10 years of clarity to look back on it and go, well, I could have understood that better.
Pretty quickly, I went to work in the real world to remove the serpent. In fact, I felt like uncovering the serpent, which was was for the first time becoming aware that I had this belief that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't enough. That in itself was massive liberation. But then it took me some time and some courage to bring in, allow the help of some brothers or community, and talk to people about it, because the belief I'm not enough, I created evidence in my life to back up that belief. In lots of ways. I would sabotage my success. I had fallen in love with a woman who was a reflection back to me of my belief. So she would always be showing me that I wasn't good enough and saying, why aren't you more like him? And why aren't you good enough at this? And but I chose that. I know that now. But I had put all of my anxieties and all of my fear and worry about not being enough into one most intimate and secret, shameful part of my life, which was into intimacy, sexual intimacy. And through the years of my marriage, I had developed severe sexual anxiety, performance anxiety, and it was a gripping psychological racket. And I was so ashamed and so embarrassed, I didn't tell anybody. And my wife too, she kept it between the two of us. Nobody knew. I didn't tell my friends, my brother, no one did I tell, because I was so ashamed that I couldn't perform sexually as a man, and that was the serpent as well.
Yeah. And this is what I try not to do, is like, Freud would say, of course, a serpent, this is your penis, or the concepts of penis. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't, but that also fits as well. And the idea that it is, not only did it keep working its way back into your body through different places, through your expression, through your medium of expression, and through that base chakra of the sexual stuff, but it connected that expression and base stuff. So it's basically saying this problem is something that encompasses almost the whole of you, but doesn't touch your own divine potential. There was that iconography in there as well too. The idea that that's not so wrapped around, it's not wrapped around your brain at all. We can't touch it.
Yeah. And I didn't understand that until this conversation. I also didn't understand or put together what's come from you in this conversation around that it was choking my expression because I kept it secret. I didn't tell anybody and then shortly after this dream and my life started to change, I had the courage to go to a friend and start to say, hey man, I'm suffering and I want to share it with you. And that was the start of me then sharing. It's interesting, in this book that I've written, The Art of Conscious Communication for Thoughtful Men, there's a chapter in there called You Are Not an Island. And I talk about how, yes, your own personal suffering and struggles are yours alone to find your way through, like with the serpent. But at the same time, communicating with people, sharing your problems, being vulnerable, expressing yourself to community is an important part of that healing, and through me having the courage to now be able to talk about my struggles and my sufferings, other men come to me and go, oh my God, you too? I thought I was alone,
Yeah, that's the biggest thing about community, is that you're not alone. You find out exactly how many other people are hiding embarrassing things out of shame because they think they're the only one. Well, maybe it wouldn't be so shameful if you realize this is actually kind of common and maybe we can fix it together.
And maybe we can fix it together, through talking about it and through supporting each other to find a way to keep the serpent out from going back in again,
Exactly. Because it's very comfortable there. It's very much at home.
And I'd identified with it.
Yeah.
It was a part of my sense of identity. You were talking before about a habit, that maybe it's a habit that we want to get rid of. Well, our sense of identity is habitual.
Yeah.
We formed habits around how we identify, and we identify with certain thoughts, beliefs, emotions, with these things. And prior to having an identity crisis, we believe that that's life and death, real life and death. We think that if there's a death of ego, that we're actually going to die. Mm-hmm. And, luckily enough, I've had 2 identity crises in my life and I didn't die. In fact, it's an opportunity to reinvent a little bit about who you choose to be.
Yeah.
But before going through that, we don't know that. So this dream, you've helped me to understand that this racket, this identification with not being good enough, had gripped itself around my expression, my ability to love, my ability to have sex, You know,
Yeah.
it had gripped itself around all of those things, but the one part of me that was still free was this connection to the divine source, this optimism that there's a light, there's a way that you can free yourself, a liberation from this, you know?
Yeah.
Wow.
It seems
Yeah,
like
that's cool.
you were really looking forward into so sometimes not fully understanding a dream immediately, even if like you know what it means, you know what it was about. Sometimes
Yeah.
going through the picking apart the little pieces of it, the
Yeah.
sequence of events, the way
Yeah.
things felt as you attempted them. So in this sense, I think you were subconsciously, dream consciously aware that you would probably try to fix this on your own anyway, and that it was probably not going to work. And eventually you'd get around to
Yeah.
asking for help. This is kind of like
Yeah.
you're showing yourself, you know how you're going to, you know what you're going to do about this. It is what it
Yeah.
is. That's me. That's my process. And it was almost giving you a little preview of you're
Yeah.
gonna do this anyway. So let me just
Yeah.
show it
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
Like, you
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
me. I know this is what I'm going to do.
Yeah. That's cool, man. I like that. That's what it's like. Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes, so if we had talked about this, say, maybe 10 years ago, what would I do? I would not give advice, but I would probably angle you in that direction of saying, is that probably what you're going to, I mean, are there things in your life you think aren't working? Does it relate to, let's say, if you volunteered this initially, and at the end of the dream when I woke up, this is what I felt it meant. Okay, now let's look at the symbols and the process in terms of what are you telling yourself about what's the best way to handle this?
Uh-huh.
So we probably would have discussed at that time, the dream doesn't think you're going to be able to do this on your own. Do you want to try that first, or do you want to shortcut the process and maybe jump to looking for help sooner?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, whether that's realistic or not. Sometimes people are like, yeah, I got to try it on my own first. Hey, go ahead.
Yeah.
The dream said you probably
know,
would.
and I think if we had have had this conversation back then, maybe if we had it and we weren't recording it to share it with the big wide world, I might have opened up to you and said, hey brother, I've got this deep, dark problem that I'm too scared to tell anyone about, you know? But it's certainly taken me, 10 years of working on myself and my healing and letting go of shame, where I don't mind now, man. And in fact, I hope that people who listen to this, I hope there's someone who feels a bit stuck, who feels like, oh, wow, I'm not alone.
They see themselves in our discussion.
Yeah,
and they realize it.
And
that's a tough thing too. You were saying like 10 years ago, you probably weren't ready to have this conversation. So, but it would have to be private and, which is tough. Cause I don't know, as much as this is, I'm sitting in my little cave here. You're in another part of the world, like through the cord, opposite me. And we're just talking about a thing and trying to understand it together. But then at the same time, I am producing a show to record and really, I try not to think about that. I'll just stare at the camera and like,
I had forgotten
become
about
a mental,
right?
I know, but I'm trying to get into that. I'm not here. I'm in your head. You're taking me on a journey down this path of visions. But that is a tough thing. It's like, I'm trying to produce content that's interesting and useful, educational, but also it's very intimate and personal. And some people aren't ready to share some things with the world, especially before they've had a chance to reinvent themselves in a way that allows them to feel that confidence again of like, it's okay to be vulnerable, because this is not actually the deadly vulnerability that it felt like way back
That's
when.
right. Yeah. In fact, there's a liberation and a strength in vulnerability. Yeah.
And finding a good place where you can be vulnerable and you're not putting it out there to get shit on or smacked around. You're putting it out there and it's going to be handled properly, that the people who are going to put their hands on your problem with you are there to help. And you can, that kind of a trust is amazing. I release all kinds of crazy ideas onto Twitter, and not everyone is interested in being helpful. Some of them are interested in being very angry and hurtful. And fortunately for me, I don't care so much. Yeah, that's their story. I don't mind
either. That's their story. And I really have got to a place where I don't mind what people think of me. And so therefore I feel impervious to being hurt in that way. I mean, I think the only way someone could hurt me is literally physically, if they walked up to me and did something to me physically. And that doesn't happen because that's just not a part of my reality. But in terms of psychologically, emotionally, or on social media or whatever, I don't think I can get hurt because I don't mind what you say. And that's your story.
And that takes a very strong core. That's something where you got to really know who you are and what your value is. And then you can look at other people and say, they're having a bad day, or they're just wrong. Yeah. They got the wrong idea.
That's their life. That's the way they are in their life. And
maybe they're a rageaholic.
So to rewire, to create new neural associations. I went to work on myself, man. I've spent a lot of time and a lot of repetition.
Well, you really did change your whole life.
I changed my life, from this dream, and I wired a new belief, which is I am enough, completely enough, just the way I am. I'm exactly the right amount of everything to be me, and I shouldn't be more like anybody else because I'm not. I'm not anybody else. I'm me. We all are, and so I'm on a mission now to inspire people, anyone who wants to listen, to inspire anyone to remember that you are exactly enough of everything to be you, and you shouldn't be more like anyone else because you're not. You're exactly who you're supposed to be, and that's perfectly enough. And I think it seems like, that's a nice kind of fluffy hippie idea. Mm-hmm. But when you actually wire it neurologically, then your version of reality changes, right? Because your version of reality is to do with your biases, your beliefs, and your neurology and your predispositions to everything. Mm-hmm. So when you get in there and work that out like that, it all changes, man.
Oh, yeah. And you had, at this period in your life, you had just started leaning into the men's group experience. Like that had not been a part of your life before that. And then actually like this first ever sweat lodge, you had kind of a vision flight out of body feeling. And then a dream that night that related to that experience in a way. And so sometimes it matters that there are men or women, the masculine or the feminine, in a dream expressing specific things. So there was something in your mind, the way you conceptualized it is that leaning into this community of men for support was going to be beneficial. Something felt right enough about that's how your brain presented it to you in sleep that night of like, this is going to work. This is something good. This is something important that I should continue to explore. That ended up being the case. That helped you kind of move through the transitions that needed to happen and get to the other side in a better place.
Yeah, for sure. Benjamin, it's so cool talking with you, man, because I kind of knew dreams there's got to be something going on because it's in our subconscious, right? Mm-hmm. There's got to be, but I never really went and read the books about this is your dream and this is what it means. And I never kind of went there, except this dream was the one part about this dream that was clear to me was that I uncovered the serpent, which was that I had a belief that I wasn't good enough, right? That was the only part that and I thought that's all I need. But I've really, really enjoyed this conversation, man. It's been enlightening, it's really filled in all the gaps and helped me understand it on a much deeper level. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great thing as far as like, even if you think you know the answer, sometimes just taking a second look at it without changing the answer at all gives you a better understanding of how did you get there? Why does that even make sense to you? But
and all the pieces fill in, like, and now this book, like, I never consciously thought I'm going to write a book for men. I never thought that. I was writing a book about conscious communication in general, and my book writing mentor, she said to me, you need to pick an audience. And she said, I think men need this book. Yeah. And so then I went, okay, sure. So I started tailoring it towards men. But now talking with you, I'm like, wow, this goes all the way back to the dream.
Yeah, very much. And this, as you mentioned before, and I forgot we'd said this too. You said this was a kind of a life-changing dream. I see why.
It was.
I see why now. It makes perfect sense. I would wish this experience on everyone to, if they need it, of course, to find what it is they think they're missing or doing wrong, their approach, their perspective, and get that inspiration to change it. That's hopefully that'll be your book for a lot of people.
Yeah, thanks, brother.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're at about coming up on an hour and a half. You feel like we've had a good discussion about it and come to a better understanding. You're awesome, you don't have more questions?
No, I don't. It's been really, really lovely, and I've got a lot from the conversation. So I just want to thank you for that.
Good times. I appreciate that. Well, then we're going to wrap it up. We're going to let our friend go. It's early morning over in Australia for you. You got a busy day ahead of you, I'm sure. Lots of men to help. So I'm just going to say once again, our friend is Jem Fuller. That's JEMFULLER, and it's at jemfuller.com. Jem Fuller on social media. One more time here because my memory is terrible. He is a leadership coach, published author, TEDx speaker, and international retreat facilitator, and I've appreciated having you here. I'm going to say to my audience, hey, please like, share, subscribe. I got books for sale too, housekeeping. Look in the description. It's all there. And Jem, thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Awesome, Benjamin. Really nice to meet you, mate. Take care.
Good deal. And everybody listening, thanks for listening.
See you later.